What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Game Time Podcast, your weekly podcast with your boys, Snowbike Mike and Tom Bach, where we fill you in on all the gaming news you need to know about and sprinkle in a little sports topics. Today is episode 12, and we're going to have a fun one for you, folks. We are going to go full spoiler cast mode on Marvel Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. I know myself, I destroyed that in about 4 days. Tom Bach, he ate that up in a matter of about 3 days. He's ready to talk Spider-Man with y'all. Are you guys ready? Tom Bach, are you ready? How you feeling out there?
I'm feeling really ready, Mike, and I'm glad that we've always talked about doing a spoiler cast. This seems like the perfect game to do it. I just platinumed it the other day, as a matter of fact. I didn't do it in 3 days. I was a little generous of you. But I finally did it, platinumed it. I'm not a platinum guy, so, man, it was exciting to get through that thing. So it's exciting. And for anybody watching, definitely we're going into spoiler stuff here. If you haven't finished the game, we're going to talk about the story and some stuff that you probably don't want to hear if you haven't finished it. So last warning on spoiler cast.
There you go. You've been warned by Tom Bach himself. We are going diving deep right into it. So, Tom, why don't you helm this episode? Take me through it. What do you want to talk about?
So, Mike, what I wanted to talk about too, but I'm excited to talk about this too, because the game definitely grew on me as I went, and I'm kind of like in that it's in my top 20 somewhere now kind of game. Like I really enjoyed this game. So there's three things I kind of thought we would do, and sort of do them as kind of different segments. Talk about the story, talk about the gameplay, and then just kind of talk about other, right? Because there were some things that happened, whether it was sort of the post-credit stuff, which we can talk about, that's a little bit on the story side, and just, things that we sort of took away from the game overall that don't really fit into story or gameplay, or maybe some combination of those two things, right? So if you're good with that, I thought that would sort of be the three main topic areas and kind of fold everything into that. Cool?
I love it, Tom. Let's dive right in.
All right, so let's start with, I think we'll start with story, man, because I think that was the thing. And why don't we start with just kind of high level impressions of stuff? So for me, the story really grabbed me, and I didn't know that I was expecting it to grab me the way that it did. And what I mean by that is, man, look, I think I've talked about it in the podcast before. I'm not a huge comic book guy. I haven't read really anything. In fact, I was just bugging you the other day to give me a couple of nice recommendations on some comics, because I really have never gotten into it. That said, I've watched, every Spider-Man movie, as most of us have, and certainly had some idea going in as you see certain characters. Hey, I know who Norman Osborn is. I know who Doc Ock is. And so you kind of have some preconceived feelings of where it's going to go. But as a non-comic book guy, I don't know what I expected from the story overall. And I got to say, man, my biggest takeaway from the story, kind of by a mile, was it was a really believable story in terms of having, villains. My struggle with comic books or stories of that nature is always sort of like, hang on, my phone, I got to shut it off. Is always, do I believe their motivations, right? If I see a guy being overtly bad or evil, do I believe it? Do I believe that he could ever be that evil of a guy, or that he could ever do what we saw Doc Ock do, or any act of, people would immediately think of as good or bad? Did I believe it? And to me, that was the thing that really caught me the most, was I sincerely believed the motivations of the characters, whether it was, what Norman was trying to do. That whole story was about him trying to save Harry's life, right? That was really what started all of the sort of things spiraling. So I believed everything he did. I believed everything Doc Ock did, because he felt slighted by Norman throughout his career, right? So to me, that was sort of the best part of that, was I believed the motivations enough to where I got incredibly invested, way more than I thought I would, not to mention just the great voice acting, and we can talk about that in a minute. What about you? What about the story, just sort of high level, kind of jumped at you?
Tom, I think you hit the nail right on the coffin. I mean, coming from this comic book era and a lot of the Batman games, the story can go any which way with so many villains to add in. I think they did a really good job of kind of containing, like, here's the Sinister Six that you're going to see. Here's the one guy. And then here's Norman Osborn in the background. What is he doing? And I think that all kind of went well and wove each other in. And I had a good time with the story. I don't know what I was truly expecting coming in. I didn't know if it was going to be one mainline story or if we would see Norman Osborn doing one thing on one side, Doc Ock slowly losing his mind and becoming Doc Ock right in front of your eyes. That was pretty fun to watch. Or I forget his name, Martin Wong, I'm going to call him. I don't know what Mr. Negative was, Mr. Martin Lee.
Yeah.
I would say that one was one of those of like, the moment you saw him, I think everybody was like, that guy's Mr. Negative, you know what I mean? But that kind of went to the wayside, like you said, with Doc Ock kind of losing his mind right in front of us. That was where my eyes really went of like, that will they, won't they? Peter, oh my gosh, the suit just got exposed to Doc Ock, but he was like, oh, you're just building the suit for Spider-Man? How smart. And then the end scene of him like, no, I knew the whole time, Peter. Like, you've been building my gadgets so I could defeat you. I thought that was super cool. So yeah, I think all in all, the story grabbed me. I liked most of the beats. I don't think I had any issues with the story at all. Would have liked to seen a little more love with some of those side villains, we'll call it. It's like, I felt like Rhino, Scorpion, Electro, and the Vulture were just kind of there for like brief moments. I would have liked them seen a little more in the story forefront.
I think that was tough for them, right? And I know I was looking at Kind of Funny's spoiler cast with the game director, Brian Intihar, whatever his name is, and that thing's up to 100,000 views by now, right? And I don't know if you watched it, but it was incredible to kind of hear his perspective on stuff. And I think that was a challenge for them, right? How much do you dole out? And in order to make any character believable, you almost have to invest enough time in them to get to that point. And I think that was a big challenge in this game that, depending on where you fell on it, they either didn't do enough of it or it could have made the game ridiculously long and impossible to follow at some point. I think he talked about that. Like, it just became too much. I thought the MJ relationship too. I know people have, we'll talk about gameplay in a minute. I know the MJ parts weren't everybody's favorite, but the thing about the story that was also cool, and I know, again, with so much comic book lore out there, it's tough to do this, but just the way that they doled out the story to you so that even though it was a moment in time that you're dropping into his world, whether it was finding a backpack, every little thing sort of contributed to it. All the little sort of nuance as the story wasn't just laid out in cutscenes. In other words, it was laid out through every little piece of action that he did, which I thought was kind of genius in a way, right? You really understood sort of where he was at that moment. Yeah, hey, I'd fought this other villain before. Oh, I remember when I dropped this over here. I thought that was just genius way to kind of tell it. It was weird that he and MJ were kind of at odds the whole time, which I thought was another interesting, kind of different, at least again, as a non-comic book reader. Every Spider-Man story I've seen with them, they've either totally been together or not at all, where they didn't exist, for each other. So I thought it was cool that they were in the state of their relationship that they were in, right? That was such an important thing for him too, with what happened to Aunt May. And the essence of Spider-Man to me has always been, he'll always do the right thing for the public, but it will always personally hurt him, right? That's always the center of that story to me, which was no more evident than what happened with May, right? He has a chance to save her and chooses not to in favor of saving the world, basically, right? Which is that's Spider-Man. To me, that's always what Spider-Man's been about, is that tough choice.
No doubt. Good thing they didn't give me that option, because I was going to save Aunt May.
I would too.
I just want y'all to know I was going to skip New York. I was going to save Aunt May right there and then. Yes, I loved the relationship with MJ. I thought that was super cute. And it was like one of those of every time you got with her and they were having a conversation, I was yelling like, just say something nice to her. Get back together with her. You can do it. And then the flip side, him and Miles, that was so much fun to be with Miles Morales' dad, watching that interaction together. Then they lose the father, and then he becomes kind of the father figure to Miles. That was so awesome. And that final scene with him and Miles, that was probably the icing on the cake for the whole video game for me, of I think something's happening. And he's like, oh yeah. And they both jump up on the ceiling together. That was so cool.
That was so cool. Yeah. And one thing I will say too, and this is a little more on the gameplay side, just because of the way that the voice acting was so good in this, and that we talked about in the last podcast just briefly about the mocap and how good it was. Man, if that's not the best mocap I've ever seen relative to just being able to tell what a character is thinking, subtle emotions that you only get out of pure, non-CGI generated or recorded. Man, that was so strikingly good. Certainly, I'm sure you played it on 4K now with your awesome Spider-Man Pro. Man, that thing looks like nothing I've ever seen before, right? That thing is absolutely incredible. Not to mention just sort of the quality of Laura Bailey doing the voice acting of MJ and some of that. In fact, it was so shocking, and we're not talking about Tomb Raider today, but it's almost kind of ruined me now to play another game and see how different it is. Man, it almost looks like a 10-year jump in technology to watch the quality of what Insomniac did with facial expressions and voiceover and all that compared to anything else I've ever seen.
Oh, Tom, you hit the nail on the head for me right there. That was the words coming out of my mouth of, after playing Spider-Man with the incredible voice acting, making you feel throughout the story with clearly how great the cutscene work. Like you said, the facial animations were on point. And that final scene with Doc Ock, passing out, dying right in front of Peter as he's leaving him. And it's just so emotional and you're feeling it. You're in it. And then, like you said, to now move on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, those first cutscenes were hard for me to get through, to the point where it's like, what is this? How did this video game even come out? Because I'm coming off the Tales of Spider-Man that just made me feel, that made me invested in this. And I got Laura and this guy talking, and it doesn't even seem like they're talking in front of each other, nor are they in the same room. It doesn't feel right. And man, that is a true testament to that. Of course, you've heard, I'm sure, with that Kind of Funny Spoilers cast and a lot of other people's review, how cool it was for them to tape lines of Peter kind of still and feeling good, and then exhausted Peter, where he's huffing, he's puffing, trying to get the words out of his mouth. That was really cool to have both those different dialogue trees going on inside of the game.
It was so amazing. What an amazing technical touch. And after I found out about it, I definitely experimented with it and would swing and try. I mean, that is just some next level shit, man. It really is. The bar that they set with storytelling, Horizon did really well with that, although people thought that was a little cardboard at times, and I get why people had that criticism of it. But that was some of the most AAA storytelling that I'd ever seen. And like I said, there's one thing that I love in any kind of, I mentioned sort of the, believability of villains and what would make them. Granted, with the Sinister Six, you don't necessarily know all their motivations and why they became what they did. But one of the things that I've always loved about, and I think comic books do this to some degree, at least those that I have read, and certainly, there's shows like Game of Thrones, I think, does it better than anybody, which is sort of like the notion that evil is just a point of view or bad is a point of view, right? If you're on the bad side, that's traditionally viewed that way, it's really just your perspective on things. There's not a good and a bad. There's not a right and a wrong. It just means you were put in that position through whatever consequences, and what you think you're doing is right. I think Game of Thrones does that brilliantly with someone that you thought was despicable, worst person ever. You hear more about their story, then you're like, okay, I kind of get why they are the way they are. And to me, that was everything. I kept feeling that. And that's why I think it was so hard. The last scene with Doc Ock was so hard. Even, and I kept waiting for, just because, the movies, for Norman to turn into Goblin, right? Like I kept waiting for that moment, but I totally understood him, even though you viewed him as sort of like, hey, this guy could be perceived as evil. It's like, he's not, he's trying to save his family, right? It's like the Darth Vader story. He's trying to save his wife. It's like, does it make you evil when you do something out of love, right? And I really enjoyed the way that Insomniac kind of did that. But yeah, it's made it difficult to play other games now, and I think it will for quite some time, which is a super testament to what Insomniac did with the way the story was, and how they did it was brilliant.
Totally. It was a great time. That third act was really packed. I would say that, like I kind of told you, like I wanted to see more from the Sinister Six, kind of the other villains. I would say that first act of you kind of being Spider Cop, kind of getting to know Martin Lee and Osborn, and of course Doc Ock, and then into the middle where now, the Sable police are out, the demons are out, and you're kind of feeling around. And then to get to that third act where it was like, okay, now we're fighting all six of those guys. Okay, we got to keep it moving here. Like that was like, whoa, this is intense for the last final 2 to 3 hours of gameplay. This is flying right now. So it was a little action-packed at the end there, but it was a good lead-up. It was a slow, steady lead-up there. I think that middle could have got a little more action in it. The Sable police clearing out the Sable bases, Miles trying to duck and dodge them. Sable was all right, but I would have liked to see a little more there in the middle.
I agree too. And that last act is insane, as you said. Like, we'll talk about the gameplay in a minute, but there's just some amazing amazing fight sequences in that. But yeah, story wise, I think it did kind of drag there a little bit. What did you I mean, did you, when you first saw Aunt May being sick, when they first, sort of, I think there was a cutscene, they showed her coughing blood, I want to say, or something into a handkerchief, or she knew she was ill. Did you see that coming? Did you think that there would ever be a story in which she would die?
I did not see any of this coming, to be honest with you, Tom. Like, I don't think I was foreseeing anything. I was so caught up in the moment of like you said, the gameplay was so on point, the voice acting, the graphics, to the point where like I wasn't even thinking 10 minutes ahead of time. I was like, man, what am I going to do now? How am I going to swing from city to city? So Aunt May getting involved, Miles getting bit at the end there, Doc Ock and me, and Doc telling me he knew who I was. I did not see any of that coming. I kind of had a feeling every time I would go into the scientist layer of Doc Ock and I would be making things, I had a feeling I was like, am I making his suit right now? This is going to be bad, isn't it? And like, of course, that kind of happened at the end. I saw that one coming.
Yeah, that one I didn't. I felt like I didn't think that Doc Ock would know that he was Spider-Man. I definitely didn't think that they would kill Aunt May. That was a really powerful moment. That was by far the most powerful moment. I mean, the Doc Ock moment too with, dude, that, again, the cinematography and the way that they frame stuff, it's not cinematography, it's computer with half his mask missing. Like there was so many moments. We can talk about gameplay next here with sort of, doing all the different photo mode and stuff. But man, just the brilliance of some of the angles that they would film stuff from to give you that visual storytelling. The Aunt May one really shook me, man. I got to be honest. Like that, I didn't think they would do that, especially with Uncle Ben being dead. And he really wasn't with MJ, like in a purely committed, we know we're together relationship. And I was like, man, he is at the all-time low of lows here, having lost Ben and now this. And I assumed Martin Lee meant something to him too. I mean, Feast was a big deal for his life. And I think when he first finds Martin Lee's lair, Martin Lee even talks about, or one of the collectibles says like, even though you may read some things about me and figure out that I'm up to some no good things, this was real to me, right? Doing Feast and helping homeless people and all the stuff they were doing was real. And so, man, this guy's like left with nothing. Feast burns to the ground. His aunt dies. Like they really piled on him. So anyway, I thought I haven't had a game since really Red Dead that sort of genuinely made me stop and shed a tear and be like, wow, they took this as far as they could take it without it getting weird or sappy or anything.
I love that, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on, let's talk about the final end credit sequence.
Yes.
You kind of mentioned it, but here's one. Harry is led on to believe that he's just out of the country. We haven't seen him all game long. He's out in Europe, doing whatever, going to school, and we're out there kind of hitting his research labs. And then at the end, we get the big reveal that he's inside the tube and he's trying to save his life. What'd you think of that?
Well, so, I think it was just before that MJ did and we can talk a little bit about the MJ scenes, but she found that he was sick and knew that it was all a ruse, that he hadn't actually traveled. I never expected that he would be still there. And then it was weird because I went back on YouTube and watched it again to obviously with all the, sort of symbiote stuff that you knew what that last scene was when it kind of hit the glass. But then I started thinking, it's like, I don't know that I know that part of the Spider-Man story, right? The only Spider-Man story that I know, obviously, is the one from, what's his name? What was the middle Spider-Mans? What's the Tobey Maguire ones, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right.
When Topher Grace was Venom. Yeah.
Right. Where Harry,
the black symbiote is right.
Where Harry's, kind of goes down his own path. But man, I didn't know what to make of that other than there was so much obvious setup for a sequel. I know even on the Kind of Funny one, they talked about the next story that they want to tell. And it's, look, this game is sold so well and done incredibly well. There's going to be a sequel, obviously, right? They got to do these stories justice. But I did not see that one coming at all as far as what does that now mean for Harry that kind of blew my mind. I expected it to just be a goblin scene, if I'm being honest. I thought Norman would all of a sudden be the crazy one and then turn into Green Goblin and be like, I'm going to get revenge against Doc Ock or whatever he was going to do. Dude, I did not see that coming, and I don't even know that I know what to make of it. What did you make of it?
Oh, I thought it was so cool. I was like, man, that is the way to finish this video game. After seeing Miles and Pete, where you're like, man, this is so cool. Like, man, he's going to be Spider-Man too. And then going to that and you're like, where's this guy going? Because you already saw the layer, like you said. You knew about the spiders. And you're like, okay, what's going on? And then when he went into that extra room and he saw that, you were like, whoa, this is going to be wild. So I don't know where to go from there. Will this be DLC? Will this be the next story? Will this be Spider-Man 2? I'm not quite sure, but I liked the addition. I liked the quick touch, and I like that we moved on from it. Like, this didn't need to be in the game. This didn't need to be a story beat. This was like, hey, you never know what could happen next, and that's all I needed.
Their relationship too, they seem like, again, unlike the sort of in the movies where they were friends yet they were at odds over MJ or over something. They were really close friends in this one, right? In this version of the story, where he was doing the research stuff, as you said, and continuing, his mom's legacy and all those different things. They're really tight in this one. So if he ends up being, again, and I'm hoping I'm sure it will be, knowing Insomniac and what they just did, a really nuanced story. He doesn't live to just be a bad guy. He comes out with, his life gets saved, and he's got some different powers now that somehow ends up conflicting with, what and maybe it'll be Miles Morales too. They clearly, dude, by the way, I thought MJ was going to get bitten by the spider for the longest time. And I'm like, this is really going to be crazy. Talk about a twist. I don't know if that's ever happened in the comics where MJ had spider powers, but as it was crawling on her jacket, I'm like, wow, that would be pretty incredible too.
Oh, well, let's dive into the next one. You got gameplay up next, and I got to say, I think gameplay made this for me. Like I said, I liked the story. I think the story kept it going. We had a good time. But if it wasn't for the gameplay and how fluid, how fun it felt, and how different you could truly make it, I don't know if I would have been so into this game like I was. Like I stated before, I finished this game in 3 days. I mean, I just destroyed this. I couldn't stop. And it wasn't because I wanted to beat it quickly. It was, man, this game feels good. I want to stay in this game for 8+ hours and not stop. And so the gameplay for me on my side, I thought it was perfect. Tom, what'd you think?
Did you? So I think I asked you before. What difficulty level did you play the game on? The middle one?
No, I put it on normal. I had normal, yeah, of course.
Which I think was amazing, and then the top level was spectacular, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, which is what took me quite a long time. Is I played the beginning on the middle, died quite a bit. I mean, it's a complex enough system to get used to, for sure, right? There's a lot going on, and I don't think you really understand the wealth of what you can do in the air, how many different combinations and stuff. By the way, it's an amazingly crafted system, and people have made the Arkham comparison. It's way faster than Arkham for sure, and I think there's way more variety of what you can do, right? Between being able to web people and spin them, web people up to a wall, there's pick stuff up and throw it. There's so many combinations of what you can do there that I think it's a little deeper system than what Arkham is, even though it's got that feel to it. That said, I was dying a lot early. I ended up kind of getting really comfortable with it to the point that I wasn't dying at all. Probably around the beginning third of the second act, I bumped it up to spectacular, started dying a lot again, got used to that. And then probably by the back third of the second act, I was pretty much invincible. Like, I would die occasionally in weird circumstances, but I had such a grasp of how the system worked that I loved it. And as I said, I platinumed it, and I had to go back and just do everything because, dude, even clearing bases, doing all that kind of stuff to me was spectacularly fun. I never got tired of it. The multiple waves of people thing that just, 20, 30 enemies alive at once, shooting rockets, doing stuff. Man, that is a really complex, deep system that I never felt cheap when I died. I never felt like anything weird happened. It responded to whatever I wanted to do. I got to put that, dude, that's like up there in the top echelon of combat of any game I've ever played, at least in my book it is.
Oh, I totally agree, Tom. And I like you said, it was very similar to Arkham, but I think it got a little bit deeper with kind of like the special move of your suit. You could choose, the Scarlet Spider arms that I used a lot. You could choose that Rockstar guitar move. That was pretty cute. And they had different moves like that. And then on top of that, you had different web blasters you can use. I think it really took to another level where you could change it up every single time you played, to the point where I got stuck in my ways the first 2 acts where I was like, you know what? I think I've dialed it in. This is what I'm using. This is what I'm using. I'm never changing. And it was like, wait, if they have 8 options for you and like 16 web blasters, maybe I should try them. Maybe I should mix and match them. And that's when it was like, okay, try this one out. Web blast them with that instead of the sticky bomb. Try that one over there. And I think that was really cool. That engaged me a lot during those normal fights where you get super bored of like wave 1 to final wave and you're like getting bored by wave 3. If it wasn't for some of that, I don't think the gameplay would be as fun. It would just be a normal Assassin's Creed Arkham type series, but I think that raised the bar where I could change it up every time I played. My only gripe though was the stealth missions with Taskmaster.
Yeah.
I was not a big fan of that. I've told you guys many times in the podcast, I'm not a stealth guy in general, but I just don't think the system was there similar to like the Arkham series where you can go stealth, but the bad guys were just, they would still go about their day. Nobody ever got like, oh man, this guy's taken out. I should probably be on my guard a little bit more. And it felt like every time they saw me, there wasn't even a half second where you could swing over and punch him. It was, you're done now. It's over, you know?
Yeah.
And so that the stealth felt a little too tough. And then at the same time, it just felt like, man, like in Batman, at least when they knew I took out one of the guards, they at least got a little more on patrol. This one, it was like the guy could be hanging next to him. He's like, oh, I don't see Billy over there. I don't know what this guy's doing, you know? So that was a little odd. And that would be my only gripe. I would think, you know, the movement, the combat, the photo mode, that all was spectacular for me.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny you mentioned the suit and the suit powers because that was actually my one criticism too. I'll talk about traversal in a minute, but that because I was playing on Spectacular, I thought at one point that I would really, you know, you said you kind of honed in on one specific thing, and I kind of did too. I ended up with the same. I would change suits, but I would keep the same suit power once I unlocked it. And then I actually kept the same upgrades, right? You had that huge list of like 15 or 16 different things that you could add to it as well, like absorb bullet damage or melee damage, whatever. I kind of kept with the same 3 the whole game. And I was hoping that it would really be like, hey, I'm going to get in this situation. And maybe it was this way. And it could have changed the way that some of the combat went. But I didn't need to do it. I was hoping that I would need to change. Like, okay, this time I have to tweak my 3 things into, you know, one that gives me more focus ability quicker because I got to take people out faster, or I've got to be on this specific, you know, suit power, like the one with the arms, because I need to be able to traverse. Like that was my only somewhat gripe, is I felt like it was largely cosmetic. Even on Spectacular, I didn't need to play around with the suit powers at all. And I didn't need to play around with the upgraded stuff at all. I upgraded all my gadgets and I was, you know, as powerful as I think I needed to be and did towards the end of the game. That was my only, I wish it was forcing me to use that stuff a little bit more.
Agreed, Tom. I think, like I told you, I played the first 2 acts thinking, man, I'm just fine. I don't have to switch this at all. And if it wasn't for like, you need to check this out or change your suit up. Why are you wearing the same suit the whole time? These added things that get a little more in depth definitely added to the gameplay because you could get caught in your ways. And that's too similar to Batman, where it's like, we don't have all those added features. You just go out there and do the same 5 things. That's all you need. So I like that they added that. And then I know you and I are about to get in traversal, but I mean, that is what put the icing on the cake. To be able, there was a fast travel system in this game that most of the people probably never used because you could fly around this city. It wasn't like, oh, that is too far away from me. It was like, I'll be there, get ready. And you just start flying around. Photo mode on top of that. I mean, shucks, I should get Cool Greg Geddes out here and we should do graffiti time with Snowbike Mike and Cool Greg because there was so much cool artwork on the side of buildings where I just stopped half the time and would look at different things. It was awesome.
Yeah, man, the amount of different stuff in that city. We talked on last podcast about just the attention to detail, every city block, every building, and I'm sure they reused assets, but it didn't feel like they did anywhere. So dude, the traversal to me was so did you play Sunset Overdrive? Have you and I ever talked about Sunset before?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you finish it?
I played it. We never talked about it though.
Okay. So that's a game that I played and finished and loved and kind of like this one. The thing about Spider-Man that was interesting to me, not just the story, you know, getting better as it went on, but the gameplay to me got better too. Like I enjoyed the game deeper into the game than I do most games. Usually I enjoy most games the first half, and then by the second half, it kind of wanes a little bit. That game actually, I enjoyed it more as I went. Sunset was a lot like that for me. Like at the beginning of Sunset, I'm sort of like, okay, dude, the end of that game to me, when you unlock everything and get where, you're more powerful and understand the systems better, dude, the last half of that game is so brilliant to me. The traversal in particular, that's why I'm bringing it up, is some of the most fun traversal I've ever had in any game. And that game is not always kind of known for that, but man, it is so much fun to make your way through that city, because there's such precision in all the little things. And my favorite, you mentioned the Taskmaster ones. Well, the stealth ones were my least favorite, like you. My favorite were the drone ones, because the precision needed to do those was like mind-boggling, right?
It hurt, Tom.
It hurt, like to do the swing just long enough, to do the boost just off the right points. Like it, for something that looks so imperfect, like my wife was watching, she's like, "You're just swinging." I'm like, "You have no idea you can tell me to land on that tree, and I can land on that tree." Like they tightened that so perfectly that you could go exactly where you wanted, how you wanted, whip around a corner, do whatever. Like there's a game you may not have ever played. You ever played a game called Recore before? Does that name ring a bell to you at all?
Recore, I have it on the Xbox. I've never played it though.
Okay, there's a famous guy named Kihei Inafune that's well known to Mega Man fans. He's the guy that's sort of the mastermind behind Mega Man. He inspired Recore. Recore's got a really similar traversal to it, like these really complex set of movements that you have to do to navigate the world that have all this little nuance to it. But by the time you get all of it unlocked, you are so wildly familiar with it that when you drop in and do stuff, like that system is so simple yet so complex at the same time that I don't know that I've ever, besides the ones I mentioned, another one is in Insomniac Games, Sunset and Recore. I've never seen a better traversal system than that one. No way.
Oh, I think, Tom, I was giving you the face here on the podcast because the Taskmaster, I thought the stealth one sucked. That one sucked, chasing the drone. And the only reason why I say that is because the first one that I got involved with was up on the top right of the map. And I think it was the hardest difficulty one on those, because when I went to the bottom ones of the map, they were a breeze. We were easy. Yeah. We were flying. It was all good. But I started with the first one to the point where I did it like 15 times in a row. And I was like, I will never do this. Why would they put it in the game? But I totally agree with what you just said, Tom. It's like that Taskmaster thing was to show you, hey, this could be really tight on the movement and transversal side if you want to do it. You know what I mean? Like you can go loosey-goosey and still go around the city, no problem. There's moments there where you can slide right through an alleyway. You can attach to any tree you want, and it's truly incredible. I loved that so much, and it made going around the city so much fun. Some of Harry's research lab stuff was a good time. Getting Howard's pigeons, that was hysterical, going to chase down those pigeons. And the Black Cat, little disappointed that we didn't get to see the Black Cat in person as well. Those were like, hey, show up and just zoom a camera in and find the Black Cat. Like that was kind of like, But I would say this, Tom, I think the game side missions, like getting the Black Cat, Taskmaster, Harry's Research Labs, a lot of the backpacks, all of these are so similar to what we see in a lot of these open world games from, Assassin's Creed and so forth. But I think that the traversal saved it for me of not burning me out and getting bored to do these, because it was fun just to get to the little mini game or the side objective, and then I would do it. When I play Assassin's Creed and there's 14 things on the map and I got to ride a camel that goes, 2 miles an hour, I do not want to do that anymore throughout the game after about hour 2. This game, I was like, guess what? I'm going to fly all the way up to Uptown. Get ready for this. And sure enough, I was web slinging, having a good time. So I think the traversal truly saved a lot of the side stuff for me, where as opposed to in many other games, I would just get burnt out doing that over and over again.
I agree. That's one of the few games that just getting places was half the fun. So let's talk about the what did you think of the Peter mini games? I'll start with those. Did you like having to do the spectrograph stuff and the electricity stuff? Did it get old for you, or did you enjoy it?
I give you the face now like I didn't enjoy it because I was probably like, I think I hit the limit at the end. But every time I got on there, I was like, hey, this is a fun time. Like, I even did some of the mini games when you were in Doc Ock's lab where, like, you didn't even have to do those. I just did them for fun, and I did, like, the extra 10 that there were. Some were challenging, some were super easy, there was some moments where it kind of hit in the middle of the game where I'm like, no, I don't want this right now. Like, don't give this to me, this type of gameplay right now. But it would only be one, and it would be on the easier side, as opposed to if you were in Doc Ops Lab and you were 9 down, you were going to have a difficult time there. So I would say, all in all, I was okay with them. I had a good time. It was a little added layer that I wasn't mad at.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I did too. The later ones, as you said, man, they got really freaking hard. Like, there was a couple that really kind of stumped me for a while because I think they obviously intentionally made sort of multiple solutions that could work for certain ones of the spectrograph ones. It was good. It was a good diversion, man. Those games are, you mentioned the side mission stuff. It's really difficult to do a big open world game like that. And we can, we'll close on that when we hit on the other as far as what could bring you back into that world. But they almost have to add a certain number of something else just to keep you busy and entertained. And I thought that those were okay. They were a nice change of pace. I thought playing as Peter was really cool. Like, I'm so glad you got to play in his skin. We talked about it last week as well. That just added a whole different element to me. Now, whether or not all that stuff he was doing was exactly, like you said, made sense in the story or not, because he kind of was helping Doc Ock do some things. I thought it was cool. What did you think about the big controversial one? Did you enjoy playing? We'll do MJ and Miles. I'll put them kind of together. Did you enjoy the MJ missions? Did you enjoy the Miles missions? What were your takeaways there?
Personally, I did. I liked jumping into their skin. I liked seeing their perspective. I knew that I wasn't going to have the powers. I knew that it would be some sort of stealth, go over there, go left, go right, and try to avoid people. And I think they did a good enough job where every time I did do it, I was like, oh, cool, I'm MJ this time. Or, oh, man, I'm Miles this time. And it never felt like, oh, gosh, we're Miles again. We've done this 7 times. It was only like 2 to 4 times each at the most. I really can't even recall how many times we were those 2 characters, but each time I truly enjoyed it. I have seen a lot of the criticisms of like, oh, here we are again. Put me in MJ's shoes where if I get seen, I'm automatically dead and have to restart. That's boring, And I think all in all, for me, I enjoyed that. I think it was a good change of pace, and I like seeing it from other perspectives, especially in a universe so well known as Spider-Man. Like, I want to see what MJ's doing, especially with her story being like, hey, me and Peter are going to team up and go do crazy things together. Of course, I want to see what MJ's perspective is.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only thing I didn't like about it is it got very video game tropey. And what I mean by that is it felt like you knew exactly where you needed to go. I need to go to this corner. I need to throw this device, distract this guy who's going to perfectly set up his back to me. Like, it felt like a formula to get through those. And that I struggle with those kind of things. I mean, a little bit when Miles was trying to get away from Rhino kind of went through that. Like, I know exactly what I need to do. Jump down this hole, wait for him to go by, distract him. Like, there wasn't but one way to do that. And now maybe I'm wrong, and maybe people can comment and there was other ways to do the MJ missions and there was more freedom than there appeared to be. But the very last one where she was at the Sable base, it just seemed very by the numbers, right? You got to go behind this particular box, distract this one guy. I mean, it just seemed like a formula, very video gamey. That was my only complaint. I did like playing as her. I thought that was also really cool. Just to be in her skin Last of Us did that so well with Joel and Ellie, and you switch kind of, mid-story and really shockingly switch. Plus, you have to think the next game's going to be Miles, right? I mean, that's the way the comics go. That's the way that the story clearly ended there. So maybe just you playing at him was just sort of this little, let's let the player feel enough empathy. Well, he watched his dad die right in front of him. And had to be there just after his dad died, to where I think that was the probably the most conscious decision they made, to let you play as him, not because it was a fun mission or hard mission, but just so when the next one comes out, you know who he is and you've already been in his skin a little bit. I didn't totally mind them, but if there was another couple, how did you do in the last MJ mission in Norman Osborn's penthouse? Did that one throw you a little bit, or did you get right through it?
I did. So what I was going to say to you is I did well on the Norman Osborn one. Okay. If you want to throw a wrench into the formula that you're talking about of go here, go there was 2 missions as MJ that I accidentally messed up on, and I was accidentally just holding the sprint button the whole time. So I got into these weird predicaments of like, I'm running at the guy where I clearly should be hiding behind something, and I'm doing this like, oh my God, where am I going? And somehow I made it through a Sable base and Tombstone's motorcycle, warehouse, literally just doing the sprint button and running and freaking out the whole time. Oh yeah, you want to throw a wrench into the game, you do that and try to make it through that. So that kind of spiced up those two scenarios, but I totally agree. I mean, like the critics say, it's like, you just have to go hide behind this, and then the downfall is if you make the wrong step, guess what? You get seen, you get instantly shot, you got to do it again. That's boring. I don't want to do that. I actually had a couple issues with the Rhino one and Miles of like trying to figure out like, okay, where am I supposed to go in this maze right now? Like there was a couple moments where you needed him to hit something, but it clearly wasn't marked for me there. So I got lost a couple of times on the Miles one. But all in all, like you said, I think they did a good job setting up Miles now with the powers, now that we've played him and we kind of know the backstory. I won't say Spider-Man 2 will be all Miles, but I could definitely see a 50-50, 70-30 split with Miles flying around. It would be a cool one.
I would think so for sure. Okay, so here's my last two other really quick things, and we can just kind of go on to the big kind of goosebump moments because I got a couple. But towards the end of the second act, when the city is on fire and every rooftop there's another set of people to kill, thugs or Sable or whatever, I would love it if there was an after you finish the game, you can go back to that version of the city. Because, dude, I loved that part of the game. In fact, I got way too distracted. Like every mission I would stop, I would take out as many people as I possibly could. I think there was like a little thing that popped up at one point that said, every time you clear out something, it stays cleared out. And so, dude, every time, because you were getting shot at, everywhere you went, you couldn't go anywhere without getting drilled because the city was under total siege. I wish you could put the city back to that version of the city. That'd be my number one, which would be really cool. And then the second one is, because this leads into this, are you going to go back into this game? Like, what is there to see? I platinumed. You're probably pretty close because I think naturally progressing gets you close. It pains me that a game is this masterpiece of a level, and I'll put it in that masterpiece. Like I said, this is in my top 20 somewhere, that I don't feel like I have a reason to go back. I did all the challenges. I 3-starred most of them. Do they need some kind of like what Arkham did with these massive ongoing challenge rooms for score and all that type of stuff? What do you think?
That's interesting, Tom. Well, on the first one, let's talk about the environment. I think you hit the nail on the head. That was so cool to see New York transformed into that. And another moment that I really liked was actually one of Harry's research labs. We had to collect all the lightning data, and the whole city turned to rain and lightning. And it was like, whoa, like this is cool. This is what I want New York to be half of the time or 25% of the time that I play. Because like most of the time it was either clear day New York or it was nighttime New York. And then all of a sudden you had raining, lightning. You were flying around. That was so cool. The lights, it would turn like yellow or purple in the distance. I thought that was sweet.
It was a really hard mission.
Oh, that was a hard mission. And I agree. I thought New York turning into the insanity that it was. I liked that. I wouldn't want it to turn back into that. If I could choose one, give me the rain and the lightning just for fun. Because I on the opposite side, I got bored of people kept shooting at me. I was like, stop shooting at me, okay? I'm just trying to fly by here. Hard. And there'd be a rocket. I'd be like, oh, get out of my way. But what would bring me back, that's interesting, Tom, they have told you that New Game Plus is on the way. I don't think New Game Plus will get me back into it. It's just playing the game on a little bit harder difficulty. That's never brought me into a game, even like Dark Souls or God of War. That's never brought me back in. That's just rehashing things I've already done. I think what would bring me in is the traversal and just kind of cruising the city. Like you said, I've already beaten the game. I'm very close to a platinum, and nothing's driving me to go back in there. But like when I think about, man, like I could swing around the city. I could go take some more sweet photos of cool graffiti in photo mode. And if you added in that 25% of like rain and lightning to add into my cool photo mode, I would definitely jump back in and traverse around the city. But I don't think I'm jumping back in for a challenge room. I'm not jumping back in for New Game Plus. It's got to be new content with a couple of story missions or something like that, Yeah,
I'm kind of with you to except for that. I think I would do those big combat challenges again. And I think if there was a real reason to go do like a Sable base or a Kingpin base, the multiple wave ones, do them more efficiently, more effectively, something that would get me to want to go do it. And dude, the traversal one's a great freaking idea. Just like the drone challenge was a little bit that, but just make it like a checkpoint based thing. How can you get from, Battery Park to Harlem the fastest, or something that would be, race style, or checkpoints you got to go through. Something like that to me would be incredible. Because, dude, that traversal system is so precise, so exacting. You could see people just being insane at that. It's sort of like, do you ever go play Trials is a bad example, but occasionally you'll play one of those games that'll be sort of like the asynchronous ones where you're just trying to beat someone else's ghost or a time. And you're like, how the hell did they do that? That's like impossible. They get so good at a game that they can, something that took me a minute on a course, they're doing in like 30 seconds. And I'm like, that's impossible. But yet, or even simpler, like Nintendo games, like, Mario Kart Racing. That would be an incredible race type system to have those kind of challenges with timing. I think would be really, really cool. But dude, that just pains me to death to think that game's now going to sit on my shelf. And I don't know what it is about that. We talked last week briefly about what do the developers think. And I know Brian talked about it's flattering to have people nail the game in 3 days. Dude, there's just something, maybe just because I'm an old fart, that just eats at me. These guys took years to make this masterpiece level game. People binge it in a day or two. People were posting platinums 48 hours in. And then unless there's some great end game content, they're never coming back into that world. And man, I don't know. That just makes me really sad. I don't know why. It's stupid. But I want to go back in, because even getting the platinum, every day I'd turn on and do a little more. And I'm just like, it was like comfort food to go back and do it. And I hate thinking that I'm not going to play that game again. I want to play it again. So anyway.
Tom Bach, do you hear that in the background?
No, what is it?
That's Insomniac calling your cell phone because the traversal races are a great idea. Okay, let's get that added in. I'll jump back into it right away with that.
I love it. All right, man, let's close on this one. So,
one sec, Tom, really quick. Go. For gameplay, I want to touch on something. At the end, like I talked about, that third act was packed, and we fought the Sinister Six. And what I thought was so much fun, even though I didn't get to take them on one like you did. I forget his name. It's not the Shocker. It's the other guy that you chased around at the beginning and then into the bases. Yeah. No, so he was the Shocker. Electro was the guy that you fought part of the Sinister Six.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I loved the 2-on-1 boss battles at the end there. So you started with Electro and you started with Vulture, and I didn't think it was going to take a turn like that. And then all of a sudden, I'm trying to dodge electric thunderbolts coming from the sky along with Vulture flying at me. And that was so cool to grab a rocket, whip it back at Vulture, go on over there, beat up Electro and try to battle him. I thought that was sweet. And then the elevate that with Rhino and Scorpion of like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to defeat this? I got to run away from Rhino, get him in position to drop something on his head. There's Scorpion over there in the distance, dodge his thing. Okay, beat him up when he comes next to me. Like, that was a lot of fun. And once I started doing the here's two, then in your mind it goes, okay, I'm going to fight Mr. Negative and Doc Ock at the same time. Like, let's go. This is going to be crazy. And thankfully you didn't do that, because I think both of their moments were well deserved. Of like that big boss fight with Mr. Negative was a lot of fun. That was a cool one. And then the ending with Doc Ock, that was a perfect way to go out with him on top of the skyscraper. Like you said, photo mode of like, I would pause it right as he's coming at me, and I would adjust the camera angle side to side, trying to get the coolest photo possible. And I totally agree with you, Tom. I thought that was a sweet set piece, and that just raised the bar of the gameplay for me, those final couple fights.
Oh, dude, 100%. What's so funny is, too, those are my other. I was about to just literally jump into that, because those to me was yes, it's gameplay, but those were the goosebump moments, and you mentioned them. The Mr. Negative boss fight when he was the massive demon, the black and white. Dude, that was so spectacularly done. I almost couldn't believe when I was playing it how amazing that was. When he would become, Olivia was watching me, she's just like freaking out. I mean, he becomes the huge demon. Like, dude, that was pure genius. That was a big one. The other one too was the Scorpion fight, the big hallucination mission. Remember that one where he was kind of going across? He got poisoned, and dude, that again was so well done. And I just wrote in big capital letters boss fights, because all of those boss fights, and you just hit on all of them, it's so difficult to do a boss fight. And I think that's, we always talk Dark Souls on the show. People get sick of hearing about it. But what fascinates me about those boss fights is
how a developer can ever make something that's just hard enough but not too hard, and that satisfies 80% of the population's what they view as hard, versus you and I watch all these streamers who make shit look so easy. It's like, yeah, it's not even hard to me at all. But dude, every one of those fights you just mentioned, especially on Spectacular, the fight with Vulture and Electric was so difficult because there was so much going on, and it was like a movie, right? The setting between the smokestacks, the 4 boss fights in total that were there that you just mentioned, those may be some of the best boss fights I think I've ever played in any game, culminating with the Doc Ock one, which I wrote. That might be the most elaborate boss fight. I mean, there's the one in God of War that we always talk about, right? Sort of the first one and the last one, of making you feel like a true superhero, how powerful you felt, and the way that entire fight went down. But dude, that Doc Ock fight, go back and rewatch that on YouTube, someone else beating it. The amount of electric particle effects, the way that he moves, because a lot of times you're trying really hard just to get out of his way, so you're not paying attention to him completely. That legitimately may be the most elaborate boss fight that I've ever seen in a game. I don't think I breathed during that whole fight because it felt like I was, people talk about playing a movie. It felt like I was playing a movie, like the end of a movie on the side of the building, like that, the game design there, the artistic design. To me, that's those 4 boss fights are the best I think I've ever seen in any game.
Oh, I love it, Tom. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that took it to the next level for me. And that's why I said, man, that third act really felt like it was action-packed the whole time. Like, I don't think you had anything that spectacular. Of course, you had the Fisk fight at the beginning against Kingpin. You had the Shocker fight, or what were we calling a Shocker fight in the bank. That was pretty cool. But then really up to that point in between the second and third act, there was nothing like that. Tombstone was all right. Taskmaster, he was all right, but nothing that spectacular where you're like, oh my gosh, this is going wild right now. And I have to really focus in and do all the different mechanics to try to beat all of these guys. That was so much fun.
The scale of the Doc Ock fight is just off the charts, man. That was I'm just absolutely in awe of what Insomniac did with those fights. I love the last thing too, I'll close on, is I love the Easter eggs too. There was a lot in this game, like the Ghostbusters stuff, and like you said, the graffiti. It's kind of surprising in a way that something this complicated can run on current gen architect. That game, I don't know how your performance was. That game never stuttered. I never saw texture pop. Maybe once or twice something would stutter a little bit or pop in. The draw distance, I mean, everything from a technical standpoint, I've never seen anything kind of like that before this generation. It's astounding. I sent out a tweet about, if you think of the progression of games from Sony first and third party studios, right? Last of Us, kind of a new bar. Horizon Zero Dawn, kind of a new bar. God of War, kind of a new bar. Now Spider-Man. It's where does it go from here, man? That, there's so much in that game that makes it feel, dude, just walking down a city block, you see, flags and banners and newspapers and people talking and doing stuff and 50 different varieties of cars, none of which look the same. I can't believe we're in a day and age where that's kind of the new normal. And I said this after Horizon, dude, I feel sorry for people developing games after that. If that's what you're going to be held up to, whew, look out.
I think Tomb Raider's feeling that exact words right now. I would agree with you, Tom, and I think the Easter eggs are a big one of seeing the Sanctum Sanctorum, Doctor Strange's area.
Cool.
Did you see the Avengers Tower? That was sweet. I think it's one of those of man, I would go back for the traversal and for people to show me cool Easter eggs. Take me around that city. I didn't see the Ghostbuster building. There's certain areas that I didn't get to see, I feel because it was so densely packed and you could miss any of that. And I really love how they did such great great justice to New York. I saw a great Twitter video of like, man, I'm seeing something weird. And like, he's filming the area where he is in New York. And then he shows out his bedroom window. It's like that exact same area, 1 for 1. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, you know? So that was pretty cool too. I think that would draw me in. And of course, we want to hear your awesome Easter eggs out there. If you saw something cool in the video game, please let us know down in the comments.
Absolutely, man. That's all I had. Like I said, the more I played this game, the more I liked it. I think we did a top 5 or what we were expecting, the games we were looking most forward to. Red Dead's still my favorite, but dude, I can't see any game passing what the experience I just got out of with this one was. It really did surpass my expectations on a lot of different levels. We talked a lot about them today. Man, it is a truly great video game that I think anybody who games, how could you not like this game? I mean, it's not a divisive game in any way. If you played it, you loved this game, period, full stop.
It is a must play. We're going to end with this. Just a plain yes or no, Tom, because we're going to get into this discussion later on in the year. Is this your game of the year? Right now, up to this moment, 9 months into the year, almost 10.
Yes.
Is this game of the year?
Yes.
Whoo! Snowbike Mike's going to go with a no. That's how we're going to wrap the show. Don't take our opinions. Remember, go out there and play it. If you have a PlayStation 4, there is no reason why you should not be playing Spider-Man right now. This has been episode 12, aka Marvel Spider-Man full spoiler cast with Snowbike Mike and Tom Bach. We had a great time with each and every one of you. Thanks to Tom Bach for leading the conversation. I know we left out a whole lot because we kept it brief, we kept it quick, but gosh darn it, this game is massive. So please queue up those questions, comments, and concerns. Let us know what we might have missed, some of your favorite moments, your favorite villains, your favorite story plots, or maybe even all those awesome Easter eggs that anybody could have missed throughout this game in the comments below. Tom Bach, thank you so much for joining me for another week. Let them know where they can find you.
Love it, man. Great conversation today. Find me Galunga at Twitter, and hopefully, I gotta be honest, man. I haven't been streaming with you as much in the evenings. I'm home next week. I'm not traveling. Let's get after it.
There we go. We missed Tom Bach in the streams. Of course, you can catch me at Snowbike Mike on all my social media accounts. And of course, at twitch.tv/Snowbike Mike. We're streaming to you live 5 nights a week. And guess what, folks? If you like this dope Snowbike Mike t-shirt, you can buy it right now at the Snowbike merch store. Go check out my Twitch page for all the details. And thank you so much for listening to another Game Time podcast. We'll be back for you next week. See you later, gamers.
Peace.